Marcio. I'm one of the teaching pastors here. Excited that you're here. You guys are the ones that get extra points in heaven to come in and beat in the rain and still showing up. Good job. And, this series, I don't know about you, but if you enjoyed the This Is Us series, this family series, come on. If you enjoyed it, let me tell you something. People have been talking about this in such a positive way. And God has been moving so powerfully in people's lives. As we're talking about family, as we're talking about relationships and all this stuff, man, it's been a powerful series, and thank you for being a part of it with us. Today, we're going to be talking about parenting. Ooh, someone just laughed. That was, it's like, all right, so here's the thing. We titled this sermon, No Perfect Parents. No perfect parents. And for some of you, your first go of parenting wasn't done well. And you have some major regrets and things you wish you would have done differently, but now God has, through His grace and through His power in you, the second part, you almost got a second chance at parenting. I want you to know that God's grace is bigger than those mistakes. And that just because you made mistakes here doesn't mean God is not through with you in your parenting and wanting to get His glory out through you. I want to encourage you this morning. I want to hope this morning encourages your relationship with Jesus. For some of you, you were great parents. Not perfect, but great parents. And I hope that today you leave here more encouraged about your relationship with Jesus and your parenting. Now there's the other side of it, right? Children, because we're all children, aren't we? We're all children. You all have parents. And today could bring in some emotions because you didn't have good parents. You had terrible parents. And I hope that you leave here encouraged by your relationship with Jesus, knowing that regardless of what happened during that season under that kind of authority, that God has made you the parent that you are today. And it's through His grace and His power in you that's made you who you are. And that you're not going to be like that example of those parents you had. And that this morning you would leave here a little bit more encouraged, and also that something in your soul would lead towards a moment of reconciliation. Not like relationally where you have to talk to these people again or engage with them, but maybe just between you and God, there's some peace that happens in here. And for some of you, you had great parents growing up. And I just pray that today you grow in more of appreciation of them, that God will encourage you to give them a phone call today and say thank you. Because parenting is tough. And at the end of this service, we're going to have a moment where everybody that's a parent could come here and receive prayer. Because I want you to leave here full of joy, full of peace and God's grace. Because there's no perfect parent. And can I apologize to myself and to all of you that are parents, because I thought I was a perfect parent. And actually, we all did, before we had kids. Right? Because before we had kids, I'd look at your kid and be like, man, look at that kid. It's like, that kid's pulling his pants down in the middle of public areas. Look at this kid. Look at what he's saying. Oh, he's a biter. He's a biter. Oh, this kid's always sick. Stephanie, we're going to do things different than those people. Then what happens? You have kids. It's your kid pulling down their pants in places. Right? And you're like, oh my gosh, we don't do this at home, I promise, right? And then it's your kid being the biter. Anybody had a biter? Come on, let's confess. Yes, oh my gosh, who's the worst? Right? At a party, there's like a bunch of little teeth marks everywhere. Whose kid is it? I'll pay the medical bills, right? Your kid's the one that makes up cuss words and the teacher calls you and you're the pastors, right? You're a pastor, like, hey, so-and-so made up a cuss word, like, oh gosh, we gotta talk about this. There's no perfect parent. And as parents, guys, that's what I said, I want all of us to leave here just having the peace and grace of God, knowing that we've allowed Him and we constantly allow Him to parent us as we parent, to have Him be involved in our lives. Because parenting is hard. And I think this is why we appreciate the show This Is Us so much. Because you love Jack and you love Rebecca and we love watching them parent. They're not perfect by any means, but they try. They try to love their kids. They try to raise their kids well. And we love their humility. We love the show. And that's why it pulls the heartstrings, man. You can't sit there and, and look at these parents and be like, that doesn't connect, right? It just pulls you in. Because as parents, what we want to raise our kids really to just become more like Jesus. And it's interesting, in the third gospel goes Matthew, Mark, Luke. And Luke is this guy who's a doctor, and he writes this interesting detail about Jesus. And this is the only account we have from Jesus ages 12 through 30. The only account. And this is it in Luke 2:52. It says this, and Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and people. And this is what we want for our kids, isn't it? That all our kids are just more like Jesus. That they grow up in wisdom. And wisdom is intellectual growth. That's what I mean by wisdom here. We're going to break down these 4 things real briefly. Go to the next slide, please. Wisdom is intellectual growth, but also emotional growth. We want our kids to grow in wisdom. We want our kids to grow in stature, which is physical growth, and also psychological growth. We want our kids to have favor with God, right? We want our kids to grow spiritually and have a relationship with God and a relationship with Jesus and be really connected with Him. We also want our kids to have favor with people and have relational growth and have friends and be influencers. That's our desire for all of our kids. So that's why this morning we're going to talk about 3 stages of parenting. 3 stages of parenting. And regardless of what stage you're in, and maybe you're far along past these stages, I pray that you leave here more encouraged as a parent. So let's talk about the first stage. The first stage is the control stage, a control. It's where you prepare your kids for life. That's why I put this pack and play in here. Because in the control phase, you are the primary influencer in your home, in your kid's life. Primary. Nobody, like, they go where you go. They're attached to you. And we're talking about birth to elementary. Right? Birth to elementary, for the most part, they're around you all the time. And and in every phase we're going to talk about, but here specifically, more is caught than taught. More is caught than taught in this phase. Because when things around them seem kind of hectic, and when we feel like they're running a different course, even at a young age, we kind of pull them back, and we could control them more. So the Apostle Paul writes in Ephesians 6, verses 1 through 4, he says, children, obey your parents in the Lord. Obey your parents. Obey. Because it's good for you. Because it's the right thing to do. Because if you say you belong to Jesus, you want to obey your parents. And we actually, in this phase, we're teaching them how to make decisions, but we're also teaching them about authority and how to obey. This is that phase. And then it says, because this is right, honor your father and your mother. Now, all of us as children, every single one of us as children, especially adult children, this is huge. How we honor our in-laws, how we honor our parents, they watch. As adult children, how we talk to mom and dad, how we talk to our authority figures, how we honor our mother and our father, they are watching it all. So if we want them to honor, how are we honoring, right? This is because as much as we're controlling the situation, but because we're in it, they get to see everything we do. Everything. And he goes on to say, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may go well with you, and that you may have a long life in the land. So this is just a promise that, hey, if you obey and honor, God's going to bless you. So let's go to the next part of the verse. Fathers and mothers, it's talking both. It's talking parents. It's just using one, but Paul's meaning the family. Don't stir up anger in your children, but bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. Here's the phase where we're teaching them, but we don't want to let them lose their personality. We don't want to make little robots. Right? We want to train them up in loving Jesus. Because here's the thing, in this phase, we control their relationships, their character, and their values are all here. Relationships, character, and value are all made right here. And since more is caught than taught, how we handle relationships, they watch. How we handle our relationship with Jesus, they watch. How we handle our relationships with one another, they watch. How we handle, how we display our character, they're watching. Everything. Every move we make, they're watching. And what we value, they value. If we value Jesus, they'll learn that, okay, Jesus is important. If we value sports or something else, academic, money, whatever it is, more than Jesus, what do you think is going to happen to them? What do you think they find important? Not interesting. This is that phase. Because once we get them out of this phase, we get the next phase, which is coaching. So I got this little whistle. Right? Coaching. And here's where you train your kids in the storm, because in this phase, a lot of things happen to them. And we hope that what we've learned, what they've learned here, what we taught them here, they'll start practicing here, because this is middle school and high school. This is tough. This is where I'm going to tell my kids the difference between cologne and body spray. Big change right there. Throw away the body spray, talk about cologne. Proverbs 14:26 says this, "In the fear of the Lord, one has strong confidence, and his children have a refuge." You know, in this phase, we're training our kids how to have confidence in Jesus. And listen, I'm talking to you all, because you know my life. I mean, I have between 7 years and a 4-year-old, but I'm speaking from having 15 years in student ministry and seeing a lot of middle schoolers and high schoolers. And when they've learned and they've been taught how to have confidence in the Lord, they're not going to seek it in other things. They're not going to seek it in their athleticism and their academics and relationships and their friends. Those things are supplemental. They're not the primary source of their confidence. But when we teach our kids to have confidence in Jesus first, man, it changes them, because the storms of life are coming, because these are the seasons of change, failure, and success. This is where we have to learn how to have confidence in Jesus during seasons of change, right? Whatever happens, their bodies, their friends, moves, financial situations, whatever it is, there's a lot of change that happens in middle school and high school, and there's a lot of failures and a lot of successes that happen throughout those years, and we need to point them towards having confidence in Jesus, because those moments are coming. And as coaches, we're still the primary influencer, just differently. And as coaches, we need to be aware of getting the right coaching staff around our children. Maybe it is a student pastor. Maybe it is their small group leader. Maybe it's people in your small group. Maybe it's another family member. Maybe it's a teacher. Maybe it's a coach. Maybe it's a neighbor. People that are around you that are going to influence your kids to have confidence in Jesus when they don't want to listen to you anymore. So I'm going to tell you 3 stories. 2 of good examples, 1 example gone bad. The first one is a mom and dad of 4 boys. And the oldest one was in my student ministry, and can I say I was one of those student pastors that literally prayed that he would go to another ministry. Like, you could find Jesus somewhere else. Maybe this is not the right place to find Jesus. He gave me a lot of white hairs. He was one of those. But during the control phase, the parents taught him the importance of Jesus and the local church and prayer. Because at the end of the day, kids make their own decision. And I heard one time at a church, I went to hear the guy from Love and Respect, the guy who wrote the Love and Respect, and talked about parenting, and he said, it's crazy to see that, how does this happen, right? You have great parents, and their kids turn out crazy. And then you have crazy parents, and their kids turn out great. Because parents, we got to understand that at some point, our kids make their own choices, don't they? They're going to decide for themselves, and we are responsible to God to do what we were given the opportunity and the privilege to do when we had the privilege to do it. and then the rest is on them. And this middle schooler and high schooler went wild. He got his confidence in girls and relationships and drugs and athleticism and everything, music and everything he did. He was very successful in anything he did. But then came a storm in his life and everything came crashing down. And none of these other things that he wanted to draw his confidence from was feeding his soul. But he knew about Jesus from the control phase and from mom and dad coaching and having other people influence his life. Because as a coach, you're still coaching the environment. As a coach, you still coach the area that they live in. You still have control over that kind of area in a different way. And as a coach, they would bench him. They would bench him and then they would let him play. They'd bench him and let him play and talk about the failures and successes and bench him and let him play. I mean, it was a constant battle. And that other coach is speaking into his life. Because when the storm of life hit for this guy, he chose Jesus. He told his mom, hey, I heard of a revival happening somewhere, and what I'm going through in life right now, I can't do it on my own. Can we go? Mom took him to the revival. The guy's never been the same ever since. He started serving in our student ministry. He's a great husband. He does some missionary work in rough parts of town. He's a leader of people now. Another story I got to give you is of another dad and a mom, and they're a parent of 6 kids, 1 girl, 5 boys, and one of their boys was in our student ministry, and he was 15 years old. When he was 15 years old, he got caught watching porn. And man, we had to have a conversation about that because the dad called me to have a sit down. He invited me as another coach to come and sit with him and his son to talk about it. And that's what we did at Chipotle. 10 years later, a decade later, I called the kid up to talk about this moment. It's like, hey man, can you talk to me about some stuff? Like, yeah. What was it about your dad that just connected with you? He's like, my dad didn't flip out on me when I told him I was watching porn. He was still stern. He was still very truthful and very serious and benched me, but he didn't flip out. And parents, can I just suggest something? Because, and I'm saying this in this way because if you blow up on your kids when they tell you something, they won't tell you anything. You know who finds out all this stuff? This guy. Their friends, their teacher, their coaches. I've heard enough stories of kids sneaking out, of hooking up, of doing drugs, of doing crazy things. And I'm like, hey, have you ever thought about telling your mom and dad? They're like, no way. And if the volcano inside of you is erupting, let it stay inside. Give them a chance to talk. And this is the great part of coaching because you want them to come to you. And this is what this guy now, he's 25 years old, said, now I get to go to my dad. Even though I knew he was serious, he would never blow up on me. But he was always truthful with me, and he would bench me when necessary. And here's what he said too, which was interesting. He told me that in that season, I didn't really want to talk to my mom or dad about certain things. But because my dad created an environment where other coaches were available, I went to them. But now as an adult, guess who he goes to now? He goes to dad. He goes to dad. Because the dad coached him how to have confidence in Jesus and how to have confidence in them. Now, the one story that went sour was the parent who tries to bring the control phase into the coaching phase. And they're trying to put their middle schooler and high schooler in the pack and play. And one time I had a parent, she came to our student ministry, and she kept her 16-year-old boy to the hip. Walked in, eyes wide open, like what's going on here? And we had music, kids were having fun. Students were just laughing. She heard some students say words that were inappropriate, and guess what? That's what we wanted. We wanted kids that didn't know Jesus to come to our student ministry. We wanted kids that didn't have homes that knew Jesus come to our student ministry. We weren't teaching kids how to be innocent, because that goes away. That went away a long time ago because we're all sinful. We were teaching kids how to be pure. Teach them how to fight for purity, not live in a petri dish. Because once something contaminates that Petri dish, it's done. And she would walk around, eyes open, and she even told me, it's like, Marcio, this place looks like one of the places I used to go to when I was a heathen. A heathen? And you know what I told her? I was like, yeah, it's exactly what we're going for. We want all the we want all the heathens to come in, because who's going to tell them about Jesus? If we try, and this is just a side note on our church, if we keep this church sterile, we will implode. We want the heathens to come, and I hate using that word. I'm just using it contextually. Well, as a result, she kept her kid in the playpen. What do you think happened to him when he went to college? A Christian college. Off the deep end. And I've heard too many of those stories of the parents doing too much of this. No Harry Potter, but it's okay with Lord of the Rings. Which, if you think about it, but seriously, Lord of the Rings, ghouls, goblins, black magic, dark magic, all that stuff. Harry Potter, same thing. If a Christian wrote Harry Potter, we would have not waited a decade to accept it in the church, okay? So, done all of that stuff. But then when the kid doesn't know how to make his own choices, he doesn't know how to have confidence in Jesus, because it wasn't coached. It was controlled. It never had an option. Because at the end of the day, don't we want all our children to come to this phase, which is the counseling phase? Don't we want them to have this counseling phase? We want to be their counselor. We want to point your kids to God, and in every phase, we're pointing our kids to God. But as adults, don't we want to have our adult children doing this with us? And I've seen a lot of parents, and oh my gosh, my heart, I love watching parents have great relationship with their adult kids and still pointing them to Jesus like they did when they were in the control phase, like they did when they were in the coaching phase. My brother-in-law ran wild for a season. Now he's a great youth pastor. He's a great musician, and he goes to my father-in-law for counsel because throughout the seasons they pointed him to Jesus, and that's the core idea. Can you put that back up, Ethan? This is our core idea from the morning. In every phase of our parenting, we always want to point our kids to Jesus, no matter what phase it is. And this is the phase where we all want to end up in, the counseling phase. Sitting down with your older child, talking about life. They come to you. I love what Job 12:12 says, because they realize wisdom is found with the elderly, and understanding comes with long life. That they look to you as like, hey, I don't understand X, Y, and Z. Can you help? Now, what makes this phase tough is that regardless of your parenting, whether you were a great parent or not so great parent, your kids still choose at the end, don't they? And some of you still have a great relationship with your kids, and can I tell you, that's awesome, and God's blessed you with that. And can I say, continue to point them to Jesus, but can I also encourage you to look for other adult children who might not have had a parent, might not have had a dad like I didn't have a dad, to go and give me spiritual counsel and point me toward Jesus. Be on the lookout for that. Because you're still not just a parent to your own, but God gave you and appointed you with leadership and the ability to point others to Jesus. Maybe it's a neighbor, maybe it's a coworker, maybe it's a friend down the street who's a bit younger than you, and you've already have your kids coming back, or you're ahead of them in a particular stage, and they're guiding you in that. But there's some of you that this is not going to be an option, and that's tough. For whatever reason, it's not an option. They're not coming back. But you're following Jesus, and you're faithfully praying for your child to come and talk to you. And this is why I started this sermon by saying we're going to pray for you guys, because we want to give you peace. Because regardless of their decision, you before God, God's proud of you as a parent. God is honoring you as a parent. God is happy with you as a parent. And he wants to give you his peace and his grace. And let me tell you this, even though your kids might not come to you, there are other kids who want you to parent them, to counsel them as an adult. Because you know what? when they didn't get it here, or maybe their parents are so far away and they can't connect sometimes, you could be a counselor to an adult child who's trying to figure out their career, who's trying to parent. And sometimes, man, going to somebody who's advanced in years and having that discussion makes a world of difference. And maybe you might not get it with your kids, but the Holy Spirit's going to bless you and give you his peace. And God wants to honor you by saying, hey, there's some other people that need your wisdom. That you could offer your wisdom to them. And at the same time, we don't stop praying for our kids because we don't know what God is doing. But at least in our parenting, we'll experience his peace, his grace, and his joy. Amen? So here's what we're going to do. Can I have all the deacons and their wives come up here and just spread out? Deacons, if you're in here. Carol and Bob, can I have you guys, please, to come here and pray with people too? Thanks. And I'll be up here somewhere. Troy, can you pick a spot? Thanks. Thanks, David. Hey, look. Just because they're up here doesn't mean they don't need prayer too, you know? We all need prayer as parents. It's hard. Just a couple days ago, I sat and I was a part of an insane conversation with my kids. Apparently, they discovered the ultimate bad word in my car and talking about it. I'm listening in. I'm like, where'd they learn that? And for some reason, they felt comfortable. Now, inside, I wanted to have an, emotionally, where'd you learn that? Earmuffs, stop. Madeline's thinking they're saying the word fox. The red fox, this fox. Foxes are wonderful. Like, oh my God, I stink as a parent. And literally felt the peace of Jesus say, do you remember your student ministry days? Don't blow up. Talk to them. Guys, where'd you learn that? They didn't divulge that information. They know no narcs. No narcs. We're not going to narc on our homies. So they didn't divulge the information. But we had a wonderful conversation about words that honor Jesus, words that honor others, words that honor themselves, and words that don't. And as a family, we can't use those words even though we hear from the outside. Guys, there's no perfect parent. Our kids are going to be exposed to things, and it's our job to point them to Jesus. So when the music is playing, this is your chance to come, and we're just going to pray for you. We're just going to pray for you. But I'm going to start by praying for these parents up here, these people up here. And then after I'm done, come and get some prayer while the music is going on. Heavenly Father, thank you for these up here praying for people, because you know what? We're all parents. The ones that are parents here need you, Jesus. And I'm praying for myself in here. I'm so far from perfect. And I thank you for these up here praying, because they've walked through life. They've experienced things. And so, Jesus, now they're going to be praying and extending a hand to those that are coming down and praying for them. And may this church be filled with encouragement this morning, knowing that you are the perfect parent, that you fill us with peace, grace, truth, and love. Amen.